Welcome to week 68 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
This week's hat I bought in Pokhara, Nepal in 1997 or 98 when I went there. We finished one episode during our 2 weeks in Kelowna. We had an exhausting 2 weeks of packing and moving and going through clothes. We watched episode 328, which originally aired Monday, November 11th, 1985. So I would have had a day off school for Remembrance Day. So I would have seen this one, episode 328. Eden wakes up at Kirk's apartment and is put off by the fact that he has undressed her. He keeps saying things like, well, that's all I did. So that doesn't seem to put her at ease as much, but he keeps changing the subject. She starts to remember what happened, at first thinking it's a dream, and then thinks that she pulled the plug on Cece. She wants to tell Cruz and do her time in jail, but Kirk tries to convince her that no one would benefit from her going to jail, and that he is the only one who knows what she did. So they spend the whole episode in his apartment. Meanwhile, other things are going on. So my theory that he'll try to marry her to avoid testifying against her could still happen.
I think he'll try and keep her somewhat isolated, too, as long as he can.
Brick comes home late from his bachelor party, and Amy locks him out. Eventually she lets him in, and they have a weird argument about what she might expect from him, what he might expect from her once they're married, and she says, just as you are now. At one point he locks her out because he's so annoyed by her bizarre questioning. So.
This was kind of reminiscent of some of the early Brick and Amy stuff we so know and love from earlier on in their relationship.
Seems to be a large percentage of pointless arguing that neither of them really ends up feeling the way they think that the other one does, or whatever it is. Mary continues to wonder why her beeper did not go off, and Mason thinks that someone sabotaged it. At the hospital, Mason and Mary find out that Cece is alive and back in his coma. The doctor says he's basically in the same state he was before. Now one wonders if he'll remember seeing Gina when he wakes up.
Yeah, and it's interesting in a way because it kind of seems like Gina's back at square one, but really now that we know that Eden is implicated in this, well, really she does have something over Eden if she can keep herself out of suspicion.
But if Eden ends up going to jail, Cece stays in the coma, Gina won't really have the opportunity to try again because she can't really make it look like Eden did it. So she might have to avoid doing anything overt to Cece just so that her Eden part of the plan will work out. Plus, it could also fall apart with a couple of little issues that we mentioned before that Cruz could suss out. Mary says she saw something when she entered the room, but she won't tell Mason what it is. Kelly arrives at the hospital and assumes that Eden pulled the plug. Lionel goes to the Capwell Hotel to tell Gina about Cece. She pretends to be shocked and then is annoyed that she wasn't the first person that was contacted.
And actually, I think she kind of had a point that you would have expected some sort of official notification to the wife of the person affected.
Presumably the family is responsible for that. So Lionel wakes up Brandon and takes him in his arms, and they head for the Capwell mansion. When they get there, Lionel and Sophia bond over Brandon as Lionel tells Brandon a very bizarre story that hopefully won't give him nightmares when he wakes up. I think the place is still decorated for Halloween, November 11th. And of course tomorrow is Amy and Brick's wedding, so they are are interspersed into this story to remind us that they exist, and their wedding's tomorrow. But whether that's a week from now in our time, who knows?
Yeah, I was sort of thinking the logistics of this are kind of interesting because it's been Halloween for quite a long time. Of course, we know it sweeps as well, so they've got to pack in a lot of action, including this wedding and whatever happens with Kelly and Nick and Dylan. So there's that whole storyline. But they're going to have to also, I would think, fit in Thanksgiving before the end of the month.
Maybe it'll be a Thanksgiving wedding for Amy and Brick. Cruz finishes his arrest that he was called to in the previous episode, and then gets a call about the medical emergency at the Capwell house. So he rushes over, and Sophia tells him that someone unplugged Cece's life support. And the only family member unaccounted for is Eden. She notices the torn piece of material, and that it looks like it comes from Eden's dress. But Cruz kicks her out of the room before she can do anything out of it to await forensics. Gina bursts into the room, assuming Cece is dead. But Cruz lets her know that Cece is alive, but says, "Oh, who could do such a thing to Cece?" And then Cruz is once again alone in the room. I guess just checking out things that might be useful for forensics to look at, and he notices the torn piece of the dress. And he really contemplates this for quite a while, and then he takes his badge out and puts it on the desk, and then he takes the torn piece of the dress. So it makes me wonder if he's thinking he'll resign in his head before taking the dress, so that he's not, still a police officer when he hides the evidence that he presumes is Eden's dress. He really then contemplates that for a while and looks at his badge again. Later, when he exits, along with the forensics team, Sophia asks if he found anything, and he says no. So he has that piece of dress in his pocket or wallet or whatever. And so he's going to cover for Eden.
Yes, I think he will up to a point, because I'm sure at some point someone's going to realize that it doesn't come from actually Eden's dress.
So he's actually hiding a clue to the fact that it wasn't Eden. Ted arrives, and Gina tells him where Eden is. No, that's wrong. Ted arrives and asks if he knows where Eden is. Let's try that again. Ted arrives, and Gina asks if he knows where Eden is. When Mary returns home to retrieve some things for Cece, Gina tells her that she and Mason are going to be charged as accomplices. Cruz arrives at the hospital, and Mason tells him that Mary saw something. I think it would be very beneficial to Mason if Eden were arrested, so I think Mason wants to make sure nothing gets swept under the carpet. When Mary returns to the hospital, she tells Cruz, "I thought I saw Eden."
Now, it occurred to me that given all we've seen before with Cruz putting down his badge and taking this little strap of cloth, that then, of course, his questioning of Mary is apparently an official capacity. So she's now on record, I would think, as naming Eden. So it kind of makes me wonder what his gathering of that little scrap of dress is necessarily going to do for Eden.
He can't really say he took it into custody because the forensics team was just on its way, and they would think that's crazy. Why would you touch that? We were just about to, probably photograph it and, measure the distances and stuff. So, so Cruz has put himself in a bit of an awkward position with this strip of cloth. So, I don't know what's going to happen. No one's really going to examine Eden's dress without that cloth. I mean, I guess Mary will say she was wearing the pink dress, and everyone knows she was wearing a pink dress. So, will they go to take the dress into as evidence? At that point, Cruz will notice there's no chunk of it missing. but he really can't introduce that evidence now as a defense, because that would look bad for him, having taken it, and chain of custody is gone, so, they couldn't really introduce it in court saying, oh, this is proof it wasn't Eden, because, he just pulled this scrap of dress out of nowhere, so.
Now, we don't know what other people will do, of course, because it's all moving parts, so if Kirk keeps Eden isolated and kind of keeps the dress hidden as leverage, then they won't have the actual dress that Eden wore to compare it to. And Gina, if she's feeling very clever, might suddenly find the dress or make the dress that she wore, findable.
I think
and
it
of
was
course, that one
somewhat clear
has a scrap taken out of it.
Yeah, I was thinking it was somewhat clear, though, that the dress was way too small to be Eden's, because Gina had to have a smaller one made for herself.
That's true, yeah.
I think that would be a bad idea, Gina's part, but maybe she'll do it.
Or if she could,
Kirk.
engineer it so that a portion of the dress was found, perhaps. I don't know how complicated you want to get with that.
Yeah, shredded and partly burned in Eden's and Cruz's new beach house. That could work. Mm-hmm. They didn't really have DNA back then to see that Eden actually wore it.
Yeah, this is before CSI or any of those kinds of shows were on the air. I don't know if some of this would be as possible.
Now, did Sophia wipe Eden's fingerprints off the plug? I can't remember. No, I think so. Eden's fingerprint might still be on the plug, so that's the dress isn't really that relevant, I don't think. Mm-hmm. Although obviously they introduced a lot of stuff to do with that dress, so it'll be relevant in some way. Probably more relevant in Cruz figuring out it wasn't Eden than the other way around. Mm-hmm. And that is it for this episode. We'll be back after we watch episode 329. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Even way back then, before you had children, you had what, some Dobermans?
Don't knock the dogs. I couldn't take it.
Your husband is one of the most sensitive, understanding, attractive, even sexy, if you'll forgive me for noticing, men I have ever met in my entire life.
Help yourself. You did to Jack Lee.
If I had a man half as passionate as Lionel, he could make love to 100 different Hollywood starlets, and I would keep him and feel lucky.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 329 of Santa Barbara. Brick and Amy start arguing again in the middle of the night for some reason. Katie and Marissa both come downstairs and slap some sense into them. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I'm actually back to tuning out Brick and Amy, so...
Yeah, that tomorrow can't come soon enough.
I just kind of went back to scrolling the internet every time they came on because it was getting very annoying.
Yeah, nothing really happened. They just wanted to remind us they exist. Mary tells Cruz that she shouldn't have said she saw Eden. Really, she only saw a dress and some hair that made her think it was Eden. So Cruz asks her to keep what she saw confidential. Kirk calls the hospital to check on Cece just as Cruz calls his place and gets a busy signal. So the hospital won't tell Kirk anything, and Eden therefore concludes that Cece is dead. Cruz visits Kirk while Eden is hiding in the bedroom. Kirk says that obviously she called off her engagement, so she doesn't want to see him. But even though he's not allowed in, Cruz sees Eden's dress on the couch. So now Cruz knows the pink dress is there. Mm-hmm. After Cruz leaves, Eden asks Kirk to get rid of the dress, and he throws it out. Then he has to go to the Capwell mansion to get her another dress. So they come up with the story. Ted tells Sophia that Eden called off the engagement, and he asks her if she thinks Eden pulled the plug. Sophia tells Ted never to say anything like that out loud again. So it seems like most of the family thinks it was Eden. Kelly thought it was Eden last time. Sophia somehow ends up in a car with Lionel, and she asks him to take her home, which is weird, because they were both at the Capwells, and she lives in the Capwell guest house. But they somehow end up in the car for a while. So I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, I don't know whether maybe they decided not to use a short scene or something to make up time or whatever. But it is strange because, as you say, we know the Lockridges and the Capitals are right next door, so there's really no reason to drive anywhere. All I can think is there was some sort of off-camera scene where they decided to go for a little drive and talk about things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's still a rainy night, and basically the only thing that really came out of that discussion was that Sophia mentioned to Lionel that he can't find Eden. So I don't think anything more important was said.
No, but of course every encounter between Sophia and Lionel really enrages, or is potentially enrages, Augusta. So,
and I guess it's like to show the softening feelings between Sophia and Lionel, so that maybe if Augusta someday does leave Lionel, there's a potential for a Lionel-Sophia coupling if Cece dies. Julia tells Augusta to stop wallowing in self-pity. She says if she were married to Lionel, she wouldn't mind if he was making love to 100 starlets. It's an interesting turn of events from Julia. She seems to really like Lionel now, because she didn't really like him when she first came on, I don't think.
No, and it indicates that she has much more sort of easygoing attitudes towards this sort of thing than Augusta does, which is also funny because when we first met all these characters, they seemed to almost have an open marriage where Augusta was having her affairs and Lionel was off having his. So it's interesting.
Augusta counters with, when Jack Lee started seeing others, you couldn't handle it. And then Augusta ends up saying, you're an old maid and you'll probably always be one. And Julia retorts with, you're a witch, an old witch. Things start to heat up when a magazine rep arrives at the Lockridge mansion to tell Janice that she's won the contest and she will be the centerfold in next month's magazine. I think this is the first that Augusta's heard about this. Augusta and Warren are in the living room when he arrives. Warren seems kind of excited for her, but wants to check over the contract and seems to think there's nothing wrong with it. Meanwhile, Augusta stands in the background, annoyed by the whole thing and making snide remarks, such as if she only had as much experience in the driver's seat as she has in the back seat. Augusta then fires Janice. Warren offers she doesn't really care, actually. Janice is fine being fired.
Well, I assume she's going to make some money from being the centerfold. And, maybe she's seen other potential careers. I'm sure being a chauffeur for the Lockridges was not the be-all and end-all of her life.
So Minx will be annoyed that she needs to find another chauffeur, I guess.
Yeah.
So this is something I have no memory of who the next chauffeur will be. Obviously wasn't that important of a plot point in my memory. But of course then there's the potential love interest between Janice and Warren immediately offers to take Janice out for a celebratory drink. So Augusta decides this would be a good time to tell Warren, who owns a newspaper, that Cece Capwell, that someone just tried to kill Cece Capwell. So he has to run off.
So she puts a little bit of a kibosh. It kind of nips the thing in the bud between him and Janice, at least tonight.
And Augusta says, one chauffeur down and one husband to go. Lionel later tries to sneak in through the French doors, but Augusta is waiting for him. She asks if he saw Sophia, and he says, oh, I went to see Brandon. And says to Augusta that Sophia's mind was completely on Cece, which it was. So, I don't think that'll be enough for Augusta.
No.
We will pick up that conversation in the next episode. So I guess Janice has to find a new place to live. She'll be showing up at Sally's place again, I guess, and hanging out with Kelly and Nick and Dylan and Sam, whom we haven't seen for a while, but presumably they'll all be at the wedding tomorrow, whenever tomorrow comes.
And I have to say that Nick's place didn't really look big enough for 5 people.
Yeah, it's kind of tiny. Gina notices the tear in her dress. She is currently at the Capwell Hotel packing up their things now that her alibi is complete and Brandon's back at the Capwell house. She no longer needs to live in the hotel tonight. She's decided to go back home and notices the dress is torn and thinks that maybe it got torn in the window. So she races to the Capwell house and runs past the forensics people, pretending that she forgot her Bible, and sees that the dress fragment is missing. So she thinks the police have it. She decides that her best option at this point is to find Eden's dress and switch it for the torn one. Which is lucky for her because Kirk arrives just then, because she has no idea where Eden's dress could be, and tells everyone that Eden's at his place, but she won't be back till tomorrow, and that her dress was ruined by the storm, which Cruz overhears and finds suspicious. Gina, very cleverly, to get more information about the dress, says, "Oh, well, then just hand it over. We'll have it dry cleaned and send you back with it." Prompting Kirk to say, "Oh, no, I threw it out." Now, Gina apparently knows where Kirk lives because she raced out the door, and the next thing we know, we saw her in Kirk's dumpster room in his apartment building, and she ends up climbing into the dumpster to get Eden's dress. And that is how we ended things in this episode.
Yeah.
So, presumably, Gina will find the dress and swap it, and run away because presumably Cruz is probably only a few minutes behind her, having heard the same thing about the missing dress, and then he'll find the torn one. And at least for a while, things will look bad for Eden until someone figures out that dress doesn't fit Eden.
Yeah.
Johnny Cochran might be her lawyer and says, this dress doesn't fit at all. Anything else you wanted to add about the plot before we talk about the credits?
Not really. I'm looking forward to getting back to the storyline involving Brick and the embezzlement and finding out a little bit more about his life. But I think we have to get through the wedding and various things and find ways to bring Minx back into the picture to explain a few things.
I assume she'll be at the wedding, maybe complaining that she didn't have a chauffeur and had to take a taxi or something. So last time we had credits was in episode 326, and now we have the same regular cast with one change. Instead of Amy Perkins, played by Carrie Sherman, the credits now say Amy Perkins Wallace, played by Carrie Sherman. Now, presumably these would have been the credits scheduled for this episode before the 3-day delay, so I'm wondering if they weren't supposed to reveal that wedding would go off without a hitch in the credits, you know. But then again, this isn't the kind of wedding that we think things are going to work out. I mean, Katie's coming to town. Usually on soap weddings, you know the wedding's not going to happen if, you know, most of the family doesn't show up and they don't bother hiring all the people who would be there if it was supposed to be a happy occasion. So it's a bit of a clue that this is probably going to be a positive wedding. Dr. Reston is not in the credits this episode because I guess he wasn't in this episode. But we have Katie Wallace, Dina Dietrich, Marissa Perkins, Valerie Armstrong, Janice Harrison, Kathy Shower, and the magazine rep was played by Joe Restivo. So hopefully we will see. I don't know if it'll be morning yet, because we'll have Cruz sorting through a dumpster, right? So that'll still be an evening episode. Presumably Brick and Amy can't wake up again, so we probably won't see them in the next episode.
We might see something with... we haven't really seen much about what's going on with Dylan and his map and the whole Carlos storyline.
But it is the middle of the night, because we saw a clock that said 5 minutes to midnight at one point. So there's really no reason for the people we haven't seen to still be awake.
Yeah, exactly.
So it might be all Augusta Lionel and the Capwells again.
Yeah.
Maybe... I mean, Kelly could show up, right, because she was at the hospital. So Kelly, maybe Ted and Sophia will go to the hospital instead of being in the atrium to talk about Cece. So, and maybe we'll see Cece asleep. Or maybe Cece will come out of his coma. This could be the episode. So we'll find out when we watch the exciting episode 330 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Look, all women have last-minute jitters. You should have seen me the night before I got married. Oh, I was so nervous, I wanted to run.
Yeah, you should have, man.
How wonderful! What luck! My plan worked. It all worked. Now I can go home and get some sleep.
Welcome back to Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We watched episode 330, which originally aired Wednesday, November 13th, 1985. Gina finds Eden's dress in Kirk's dumpster and switches it with her own. Now I can go home and get some sleep, she says, because it must be 2, 3 in the morning by this point.
Yeah, this day has gone on for a really, really long time.
And then suddenly it's morning in Santa Barbara. Kelly is shocked that Eden spent the night at Kirk Cranston's, and she tells Sophia she thinks Eden is the one who pulled the plug on Cece. Cruz arrives and tells them that he needs to talk to everyone in the family. Of course, Sophia is worried about him questioning Eden. And then Sophia overhears forensics talking to Cruz on the phone, giving him the list of fingerprints found on the plug, and it's quite a lot of people: Rosa, Eden, most of the family, basically. Kirk returns to his apartment and tells Eden the good news that Cece is alive. Cruz calls Eden and tells her that they have to talk, and she tells him to come over to Kirk's place. Sophia then calls to warn her that her fingerprints were found on the plug, and Eden leaves before Cruz arrives, causing Cruz to blame Kirk, which is interesting because Kirk didn't know she was gone. He thought she was still in the bedroom. Cruz finds Gina's dress in Kirk's dumpster. So the pieces, he matches the torn piece of the swatch with the dress. Now the question is he going to suppress the whole dress too, like he did the swatch?
Well, the one thing that occurs to me, and I don't know if this will really come up or not, but if Cruz and Eden are like soulmates and they've been living together, I would think Cruz could see right away that the dress is too small.
Well, it's kind of balled up though, but still.
Yeah, but I mean, if he goes to the effort of trying to match the little piece and actually taking a look at the state of the dress, I think he would see pretty quickly it was too small. I would assume so.
He'll probably put it on a hanger at some point. So, or the forensics report might even come back with the size, So, yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, what kind of label is inside Eden's original dress? And how did Gina get her copy of the dress? She didn't make it herself, did she?
You see, I would assume she got a seamstress or something to make it, but they wouldn't be putting a commercial label in it or commercial sizing.
Presumably, Gina would have removed their label so that it can't be traced back to her. So hopefully she did, unless it's labeled, Jenny's dressmaking, and Cruz goes there and they say, oh yeah, Gina had it made 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And I mean, I think most women, I'm sure Eden has an enormous wardrobe, far larger than mine, probably closer to your mom's, but I think most people, if you look in your wardrobe, you know everything in it. You know what it is, you know where you got it, you know what make it is. So Eden should be able to tell them, what the dress is, when she bought it. If you do a really good investigation on this, like, the kind of thing you might see on an investigative show, they would be tracing down how many were manufactured and, and doing a very sort of detailed match.
The way Cruz did with Steve Bassett's shirt.
Exactly. So I feel like if Cruz is any kind of the investigator we've been led to believe, or certainly the kind of work he was doing on these with Steve Bassett's shirt, he should be able to break down the actual origins of the dress pretty quickly.
Eden stops by the Capwell house and goes to tell Cece that she tried to do what he wanted but failed. And then she heads home to the beach house, which is where Cruz finds her, and asks her if she is the one who turned off her father's life support last night. So that conversation will presumably continue in this coming episode.
Again, though, in some ways I'm not sure how much emphasis could be placed on that questioning, because he knows how completely wasted that Eden was that night. So I'm wondering if he really expects a coherent answer from her.
Yeah, that's a good point too. At one point, Kelly, when she was talking to Sophia, said, "Oh, Eden doesn't usually drink this much." So.
Yeah.
Carlo has a very intriguing plan, actually, to figure out whether or not there is a copy of the map. He has rented the office across from the hospital, directly across from Nick Hartley's room, and he has either that or they've broken in early on a Wednesday morning or Thursday morning. He's got a guy there who's set up a camera aimed right at Nick, and he records everything Nick says to his visitors, and then later he has a lip reader review all of the footage, and he immediately says, "Oh, the film's in the flower canister at Kelly's place." So that was easy. It was kind of fun. They had to build a whole office. He had a lot of extras wandering around in there, or his henchmen were repurposed as camera expert and lip reading expert.
Yeah.
Warren watches Janice bake a cake at Sally's house, apartment, to celebrate getting the centerfold contract. But she's concerned that the photos might not be tastefully done, and decides she wants Nick to take the photos. Sam and Dylan arrive and search the flour canister, but guess what? That's the flour Janice has been using to bake her cake. So they yank the cake out of the oven. It's still very doughy, and they find the film canister in the dough. So I don't know if Janice, I guess she was distracted maybe by all her thoughts. She didn't notice a can of film in the dough that she was kneading, or maybe she was using a mixer and didn't notice the clunk-a-clunk-clunking sound.
Yeah, that would be quite a shock, though, if you broke your tooth on a film canister while you're reading cake.
I assume they were already plastic at that time, rather than the metal ones. But I guess if Nick was developing his own film, etc., he probably had metal ones from the war and might have been using a metal one. Couldn't really tell it was covered with dough.
I would expect Nick to be using professional grade film as well.
So. Dylan, of course, is annoyed, unexpectedly, that Janice is posing nude. Janice thought he would be much more easygoing about that, I guess.
Yeah, this is the time he chooses to be moralistic and prudish about things.
Yeah, considering he was hitting on Kelly. And not Julia, really. But she tells him it'll be all right, because she plans for Nick to take the photos. She goes to the hospital to talk to Nick about that, but he doesn't think Dylan's going to be too happy about that. So they basically decide Kelly needs to be there as his photographer's assistant. So I have a feeling they're setting up some bad blood between several people here with this photo shoot.
Yeah, possibly. I am a bit surprised anyone cares what Dylan thinks about anything, but...
At the wedding, yep, that's right, it's an early morning 6 a.m. wedding. Makes us decided to sleep in because she doesn't show up. Kelly tells Brick and Amy that Nick is still in the hospital, so he can't make it. But Katie and Glenn are there, and they dance and have a good time together. So I'm wondering if this is going to be seeing a rekindling of Katie and Glenn's romance. Minx is not present, but sends a giant cake. It's quite a big 3-tiered cake on a trolley with 2 chefs pushing it on the wobbly grass.
Yeah.
Marissa's there. At one point during the ceremony, Johnny starts crying, and Marissa tries to calm her, but only Amy can stop the crying Johnny. The ceremony finishes, and then they have their reception, and everyone's on blankets throughout this park, which is kind of interesting. Their musician is a guy playing a harmonica, which is extremely annoying to think of. He starts out by playing Sunshine on My Shoulder, the famous John Denver song, while Brick and Amy dance, and while Katie and Glenn dance. Then his next big number is Turkey in the Straw, which I always associate with cartoon characters. And luckily we're spared any more harmonica tunes.
But this will be basically on par, I guess, for Brick and Amy. Their music will be on par with their honeymoon suite, which is basically just Cruise's boat.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. Amy just basically hands Kelly her bouquet. And Kelly seems excited about the prospect of being the next one married and mentions, oh, but Nick hasn't asked me yet. So this is interesting because she was clearly not interested in marrying Nick.
She wasn't.
And I remember being completely surprised by this, something that happens later, because, of course, the last time we saw Kelly react to the thought of marrying Nick, it was all nonverbal, facial expressions.
We commented on
since
that.
I was just listening to it on audio, I was totally 100%, thinking, oh yeah, Kelly wants to marry Nick, and that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
So, apparently, if you just listen to Santa Barbara on audio, sometimes you miss things. So, but basically, even if I'd seen this episode, I wouldn't have had any sense that Kelly didn't want to go ahead and marry Nick as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. She actually goes to the hospital to show Nick the bouquet. Somewhat excited. So I think, maybe this will prompt Nick to probably propose soon, I think.
Yeah.
Because he was already talking about them getting married in Vegas, and now with this bouquet thing, and Kelly seeming to be excited about it. That may be the next thing. It's November sweeps, so next sweeps is in February. Maybe we'll see a February Nick and Kelly wedding. Then she heads over to Nick's apartment, where Dylan and Sam are developing the film in his dark room, and for a second I thought there was going to be some, issue where someone barges in before it's all developed and exposes the film, but no, they get a good print of it. And Kelly shows up, and they show her. And then Nick phones from the hospital to tell her about this idea Janice has had, that he should be the one to photograph her centerfold shoot, and that Kelly should be his assistant. And just as they're on the phone together, Carlo's men burst into Nick's apartment and demand the photo of the map. And that is it for this episode. So we've got two things that are gonna pick up where they left off. This Carlo, Dylan, Sam storyline, and Cruz in the middle of questioning Eden. Mm-hmm. Brick and Amy theoretically don't need to be seen again for the next 3 weeks while they're on their honeymoon if they don't want to show them doing anything. Although maybe they'll stop by Minx's and thank her for the cake. It's unfortunate that all these times when we get teased that we might see Minx, she never actually ends up being there, and then just gets told about things after the fact. But I guess that's part of Dame Judith Anderson living in Santa Barbara and having to commute to LA when they need her, and they probably minimize her unnecessary. They'd have to trek her out to a location for that wedding, right? So that's probably why we didn't see Minx again, but she was definitely missed. Any thoughts on how this Carlo thing is going to go, or is Carlo just going to get the map and leave?
Oh, I don't think it'll be that simple. I think someone is going to get kidnapped. It's usually Kelly, so I'm assuming Kelly will get kidnapped.
I think I mentioned before, I had a vague memory of someone storming the boat to rescue Kelly. And I, for some reason, seemed to remember it being Pearl, but maybe I've mixed the two storylines together because we did see Pearl going to the boat previously to rescue Nick. So I don't know. I think we'll see Pearl again if there is another rescue. So, and then I don't know. This Kelly and this Cruz and Eden thing could go on for a while. If he suppresses the dress, I think, Mary's testimony is going to be the thing. Mason's going to push for that because I think he would want Eden to look bad in the eyes of Capwell and get rid of her so he can take over Capwell.
And also, I don't know if it's really played into things that much, but if Mason gets rid of Eden, he gets rid of Kirk as well. And Kirk's potentially a bit of a threat too, really.
I don't know if Mason realizes it yet. So this makes me think Cece might not wake up anytime soon because he may have seen, Gina pulling the plug, right? I mean, it looked to us like he did. So
Yeah.
I think, that would bring a rapid end to this. I think there's going to be some agonizing on Cruz's part over what she did about the dress, and then he'll end up having to arrest Eden. So that will really put a stop to their relationship for
Although, as we
another few
said,
months.
in a way, he's already kind of damaged that dress as evidence. So,
Yeah, he would really have to come clean about that at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah, he would.
Yeah, I mean, he can't not present the dress because forensics, having heard about it, would search through the dumpster and find it missing now, right? That would be suspicious.
And Mary has already mentioned Eden's possible involvement. She very specifically said that, it was Eden because she had blonde hair and was wearing this dress.
And then Gina would be suspicious because she knows that dress was in there. And Kirk would be suspicious because he knows that dress was in there. So there could be some side issue there that happens with someone. I can imagine Gina phoning Cruz saying, "I know you took the dress." Because I think she'll put that together pretty quickly, because I think she was pretty sure he was right on her tail when she actually switched the dress. So. All right, well, I'm looking forward to the next episode. I hope we see Minx, but a few exciting things, and it's always nice to see Joe Mascolo as Carlo. So I hope we see him. I imagine we will. All right, we'll be back after we watch episode 331 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 331 of Santa Barbara. Eden tells Cruz that she didn't pull the plug on Cece and went straight to Kirk's apartment. She tells Kirk later that she's sure Cruz didn't believe her. Pearl shows up at the police station with a tip for Cruz. Now, it seems like he's some kind of tipster, like that Peter Jurassic character on Hill Street Blues, I think, who's used to coming in with tips. Cruz says, well, usually I'm the one who asks you. You don't come in and solicit money for tips. But the long and the short of it is that somehow he saw Eden Capwell go into Kirk Cranston's apartment at 10:30 p.m., which, as we all know, is 18 minutes after the plug was pulled on Cece Capwell. So we know that Kirk's apartment is less than 18 minutes away, minus whatever time it takes to climb down a slippery roof in the middle of the night. We then see Cece's bed, but Charles Bateman is not listed in the IMDb credits, and the camera was angled in such a way that you couldn't really tell. So I don't know if that was a dummy or what, but he certainly wasn't credited. Cruz tells Eden that, he didn't realize how sleep deprived she's been in those weeks leading up to last night. So he's trying to come up with a reason for, her actions, because, he didn't believe her, and she knows that he didn't believe her, but she's sticking to her story, so she just runs out. Nick and Kelly have decorated Cruz's houseboat in a Hawaiian theme. They have plastic leis, potted palms, paper pineapples, which Brick and Amy make fun of during their honeymoon on Cruz's boat. They do have a lovely day, chatting about things such as Brick saying, also, I'd like to find out what my real name ought to be. I don't even know who my father is. Do you think I'll ever find him? And they talk about the fact that neither of them is employed, so Brick says he'd better go look for a job tomorrow, because Amy actually wanted to stay for a few more days in the houseboat, so they don't seem to mind it. Then Amy talks about getting a job as well, but Brick thinks that she'll have enough to do with raising the baby. Carlo bursts into Nick's apartment and demands the map. Kelly escapes with the photo of the map and decides to hide out at the ghost town. Nick tells Dylan all about it as Carlo watches from across the road. Nick tries to get up, but injures himself and goes back into surgery. Dylan and Sam then suspect that maybe the room is bugged after they've questioned Nick so thoroughly about where the ghost town is. And they look out the window and spy Carlos across the street. But when they get there, the rented office space is empty, except for a single lens cap. Dylan decides that Kelly's in grave danger and must race up to the ghost town himself to save her. Now, Lone Pine is quite away from Santa Barbara. I don't know if he's going to try to drive there or take a plane somewhere close by. And at the very end, we see Kelly driving into the ghost town in a red car with a white top. And she heads into the saloon as the episode ends.
So I suspect not only will we see Kelly kidnapped again, but this will be her second go-around of being kidnapped in the ghost town.
Mm-hmm. But who knows how much time she'll spend there with Dylan Hartley before that happens. Mason tries to get Mary to tell him that Eden is the one she saw after the plug was pulled, and she gets angry with him. Later at the clinic, when a sarsaparilla float arrives, she assumes Mason sent it as a peace offering. And she asks him, "Did you read my diary or talk to Mark?" Mason says he doesn't know anything about it. And after he leaves, Dr. Mark McCormick arrives, Mary's old friend, and reveals that he was the one who sent the sarsaparilla float to her. So he seems to be in town for a short time, and they make a date for later on. He's going to pick her up at the Capwells, where he's already researched that that's where she's going to be. Now, this is interesting, because now we have a potential love interest for Mary to come between her and Mason, just as they're in a big argument. And he's a doctor, so do we think maybe he'll decide to settle in Santa Barbara and work at the clinic?
Well, we don't have as many doctors in Santa Barbara as we have lawyers.
No,
so.
That's true. Mason questions Cruz about his incomplete police report, which doesn't mention anything about Mary. And he says the investigation is ongoing. And Mason ends the conversation with, "Interesting how Kirk Cranston's become Eden's constant companion. I wonder what the sleeping arrangements are at Kirk's."
Mason always knows where to dig.
Mm-hmm. He then goes back to the clinic and tells Mary that he saw the whole police report and talked to Cruz about it, implying that he knows that Eden is the one Mary named, and tricks Mary into revealing that information, which makes her even angrier. So I think she'll be more than happy to go on that date with Mark McCormick. So it sounds like they were old friends, based on the conversations we saw. It doesn't sound like there was anything romantic between them back then. But I'm sure Mark will reveal that all this time he's thought about her.
Well, he definitely seems to know a lot about her.
Mm-hmm. Well, they talk about, their shared yearbook, so they went to school together, I guess. Back up in, where were they from? Fresno? I can't remember.
I thought they were from Ventura.
Ventura, that's it. Originally from Minnesota, but then Ventura. And that is it for the events of the episode. Didn't get to see Minx as we'd hoped, or any Lockridges, really, did we? But we have credits, once again, only 2 days after the last time. And there's a new addition. Mark McCormick, played by John Lindstrom, is a regular cast member. So we'll be seeing him for at least 3 months, based on how we've figured out these things work. So is that it's mid-November, December, February. He'll be at least around till mid-February, during the sweeps, when things can go horribly wrong, where he can go crazy and start killing people, or get married to Mary, whatever sweeps thing he's here for.
Or kidnap Kelly.
Or kidnap Kelly. He'll get diverted from Mary when he meets Kelly. He and Dylan in a battle to the death over Kelly in the ghost town in February. For the extra credits people who are only in that day, we have Carlo and Doctor. Those are the two. Joseph Whipp, W-H-I-P-P, as Doctor. That must be Nick's doctor who quickly performed the surgery on his... Was it his shoulder?
I have to say, I thought that the doctor, I almost thought maybe he was one of Carlos's thugs because he had more of a sort of thug look about him. So it was kind of a refreshing change of casting for him, I'm sure.
Maybe they were casting thugs and doctors on the same day, and they streamed him into the doctor pile. That's it for a Thursday episode. So maybe things will heat up on Friday, assuming it really was written as a Friday episode. We've got Carlo chasing people. We've got people on the run. That ghost town may see some action. And, I don't know, maybe we'll see Minx. Maybe Brick will find out who his real father is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we still don't know what's going to happen with this whole case that Augusta has concocted against Brick, so...
Yeah, because he was talking about having to defend himself. So it seems like there may be a trial coming up soon as well. So a court date. And, Cece could pop out of his coma at any moment, because Gina is having a long sleep right now. All right, we'll see you after we watch episode 332 of Santa Barbara. Bye.
Bye-bye.
The soup du jour is made fresh once a week. This week, we are featuring cream of soup du jour. Don't get it.
Welcome to episode 332 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We finished episode 332, originally aired Friday, November 15th, 1985. Dylan calls Sam from a gas station on the way to Lone Pine, but the mechanic has been paid off by Carlo and reports back. Kelly hides the map. Looks like it's in some sort of barrel, but it's a fixed barrel, so I don't know if it's an indoor well or what it was.
Rainwater sort of barrel, maybe?
Maybe, but it seemed to be inside, I think. And when a Jeep arrives, she tries to get away, but finds that a rat has chewed through the cables in her car. And so finds a building that I don't think we're familiar with, and puts something down on the ground as bait, and then climbs up a ladder to some kind of a loft. And the armed man with a cowboy hat looks around near her car and enters the building, and Kelly pushes a bunch of sacks down on top of him.
And I think we were both guessing that the man with the hat was probably Dylan.
Yeah, because she ran just before he got out of the car, or she would have seen it. So I think she'll have to nurse Dylan back to health.
And
My
of course
horror.
they're stuck there because her car's not working. Now maybe his is, but he won't be able to drive it. He may not be in any condition to be moved. So
If Carlo's men pull up, they might not be able to access his Jeep. So they might be stuck up in that hayloft for a few days while Carlo's men stalk around, which is a troubling turn of events.
another possible budding romance in the ghost town for Kelly.
What if she loses her memory and doesn't remember Nick?
That's possible. I wonder if she'll find those old bloomers again.
Sam scuba dives over to Carlo's ship and manages to get the drop on Carlo, who's in a tanning bed, and orders Carlo to call off the assassin that's heading to Lone Pine and call off all the thugs on the ship. Carlo says, I'll need to give a passphrase when I give those orders, and he gives a passphrase that sounds benign but really means, burst in right now and save me. So Sam is, let's say taken into custody, and Carlo says, my men are going to kill Kelly and Dylan. So looks bad. Mary is concerned when Eden wanders into Cece's room and wants to spend a minute alone with him. She's looking at it. I don't think I'm going to leave the room, really. And it's not Charles Bateman playing Cece today, and I don't know if we saw the face. I don't think we did.
No, I don't think we did.
They didn't even show the non-face. We didn't see the bed at all. Mason stalks into the police station and demands that Cruz arrest Eden and accuses him of covering for Eden.
And we know, sadly, that Mason isn't far wrong in that allegation.
Mason asks Kirk how poor Eden is. Kirk says, why poor Eden? And Mason says, oh yeah, she's not poor, but not as rich as she might be if she'd succeeded in killing the old man. So he too is implying that Kirk is interested in Eden's money in some way. Mark and Mary return from their lunch, and Mason teases her about the fact that they spent it discussing him.
Yeah, so Mason's actually there before they leave, and he's there when they get back.
Yeah.
So he's kind of, I think, keeping tabs on that situation a little bit.
Now Mary asks Mason not to tell anyone about what she saw. He agrees. And then later Mary tells Cruz that Mason tricked her, and Cruz says, oh yeah, I know, he told me this morning. So that gets Mary quite angry, even though, he made the promise after he'd already told Cruz. He should have said, oh, I already told Cruz. So, expecting the microforensics unit to do a more thorough sweep of Cece's room, Cruz gets some tape and cleans up the windowsill where he found the strip of what he assumes is Eden's dress. So he's in full cover-up mode. Mason enters just as he finishes and asks if he's found any exciting new evidence. So I think, I don't know if Cruz will be captain. Is he captain? Is that what he is? For very long.
Yeah, I think Cruz is really setting himself up this episode, and probably will probably continue down this path from what we're seeing. And yeah, Mason's keeping a pretty tight eye on him too, so I wouldn't be surprised if Mason comes forward at some point during all this and says, I saw Cruz in there just before they found no prints at all on the window.
Brick and Amy are eating at Buzz's. That makes sense if they're overnighting at Cruz's houseboat. They're on the waterfront, and Buzz's, smells like oysters, so that's where you'd want to have breakfast after your honeymoon or during your honeymoon. Brick is looking through the newspapers, and he has picked a job interview to go to. They say his qualifications are great, and Minx's letter of recommendation is really glowing, but she said, I saw that write-up of you in the paper, and we can't hire you.
Isn't it interesting, though, how we saw last season where Mason, despite his high profile and all the successes I guess he had, can suddenly be turfed out of the entire professional community just because Cece puts pressure on people. Whereas someone like Minx Lockridge, even her word isn't enough to get Brick hired, even for a job that he's obviously overqualified for.
Pearl reads all about Brick in the newspaper, and actually has a bit of a discussion with Amy, and I think Amy, says, oh, I don't think he's going to get a job like this, but I think Amy says, what do you suggest, he work here? Because he was talking about being shorthanded, so...
Yeah, I have a feeling that one of them, either Brick or Amy, will end up working with Pearl. That's my prediction.
Oh, this may be related to the discussion they had yesterday where Amy was saying, well, I'll work too to help out, and Brick didn't want her to, but if Brick doesn't get a job, maybe Amy will say, well, I could work at Buzz's until you get a job. That could happen, yeah.
Yeah.
That would give the set for Buzz's place a reason to be used more often.
Yeah, well, they've obviously built a new set for it. It's very obvious. At first I thought they were just reconfiguring the beach bar somehow, but it's not. It's not the beach bar at all. And
feeling they won't have much need for the Perkins living room anymore.
No.
Everything Brick and Amy do will take place in Buzz's from now on.
Yeah, which would make sense because none of the other Perkins are really part of the show anymore. And
yeah, we have Marissa. She's been in a few episodes.
Yeah, but she's not a regular anymore. And, I guess maybe they won't, I don't know if they'll even be living there anymore. That's the other thing we'll have to find out. I mean, maybe they'll end up moving into the boathouse or something.
Maybe there's a loft in Buzz's place they can
never know.
rent. Kirk tells Eden it'll be suspicious if she doesn't go to the police station to ask if they've made any progress on the case. And she's really against this whole thing of, pretending that, she cares for who pulled the plug. But he talks her into it, and she walks into the police station, and Cruz is sitting there just shaking his head. Can't believe she's, got the balls to pretend that she hopes they find the person who pulled the plug. Now there's a little bit of a surprise. Officer Ross reveals to Cruz that they found a man's footprint in the mud outside the window, and thanks to the timing of the rainstorm, they know it was made that day. And it is a very expensive handmade shoe, and they discuss the other men on the property, and they discuss Reuben, which is nice. Mm-hmm. And Cruz says, well, Reuben wouldn't be wearing that kind of a shoe while he's working. So Cruz immediately thinks, I wonder if this is Kirk Cranston's shoe, and he's suddenly got a whole new potential thread of investigation. I mean, does he think maybe Kirk killed Cece, And was he wearing Eden's dress? That might lead to a whole interesting, possible turn of events. But it's not exactly the right path, but it's somewhat right. Someone was wearing Eden's dress, so maybe that will, that weird thought that it might be Kirk will actually lead him to Gina somehow. So, of course, he decides that the way to go about investigating that is not to get a search warrant for Kirk's apartment, but to hire Pearl to steal one of Kirk's shoes. Pearl actually suggests getting a search warrant. Kirk has given Eden his keys earlier, and while Pearl is searching her closet, or Kirk's closet, Eden shows up. Pearl hides in the closet. Eden, sits down on the couch and then starts crying, and Pearl thinks he can slip past her, but then changes his mind and runs back into the closet at the end of the episode. So he's kind of stuck there in Kirk's closet while Eden is crying on the couch.
Yeah, I have to say, this is maybe showing just how far down the hole that Cruz is sliding, because it's a batshit plan, frankly. And Pearl is right. Pearl is the font of wisdom on this. He says, why don't you just get a search warrant? Because even if Cruz finds that it's Kirk's shoe, he hasn't gotten it legally. So how is that going to help him? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess he figures if all the evidence is tainted, they can't really do anything to Eden.
Well, unless he thinks he'll compare the shoe, have Pearl slip it back in, and then come in with his search warrant. But that seems overly complicated, especially since he has the power of the police force behind him. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why he would do that. It's completely insane that he's doing that.
Yeah, I think he just wants to make sure that Eden's not implicated, but I think he pretty much knows she is.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing is, what if it's not Kirk's shoe? What if it's Mason's shoe?
Right, because he has been kind of teasing Mason about not being in the study the whole time with Mary, which I didn't recall. Did you?
Not really, no.
Or he went to get a bottle of wine, maybe? Wasn't there a thing where he went to get a bottle of wine?
Yeah, there might have been.
That might be the time he's talking about, yeah.
So if it turns out to be Mason's shoe and he tries to put the squeeze on Mason, Mary's going to come forward, even though she's annoyed with Mason right now, she's going to come forward and finger Eden. So that doesn't help him. Yeah. And if it's someone else's shoe, like Ted's, I mean, that's not going to go anywhere either.
I think that's going to go off the rails a lot more than, Cruz's previous to, brilliant investigations, where he got everyone together and revealed what happened. This one, I think, is just going really far afield. So
yeah, I think so too.
Well, that's it for a Friday episode. We had a couple of cliffhangers that were Friday worthy. Kelly in the loft and Pearl in Kirk's closet. So, still haven't seen Minx, but maybe we'll see her next week. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll see Nick doing a photo shoot when he gets out of the hospital. I don't know how long he'll be have to recover over 2 surgeries. in order to do his photography, but maybe he only needs one hand to pull the shutter.
It would be interesting if, while Dylan and Kelly are probably romancing, I don't want to think about it too much up in the ghost town, maybe something will connect between Janice and Nick. You never know.
Janice and Nick is an interesting thought. To be revisited at a future time, I think. Just looking ahead at, actors who are leaving the show. There are 6 actors who only have 1 or 2 episodes left before we never see them again.
Oh, wow.
So they're not necessarily leaving anytime soon, but they're ones that I knew were leaving, let's say by the end of the year, and I was just looking to see how many more times we'd see them. And I was like, oh, only 1 more time. So we will see as they start to fall off as New Year's Eve approaches. We'll be back next week with week 69 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara after we watch episode 333 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
She has a strong alibi in Kirk Cranston, who was with her all night. It must be hitting you pretty hard. I never take an alibi personally. You can't marry the boss and put her under a sizable obligation. Offhand, I'd say we're going to have Kirk Cranston around for quite a while.
She only had as much experience in the driver's seat as she does in the back seat.